today. I'm so excited to be talking to a fabulous OB-GYN. Dr. Jaime Seeman, MD, is with us today. Her tagline on her website is "Believe in yourself and you will be unstoppable," which is like so incredibly empowering. So we hooked up. I think we met each other on social media, maybe, is how this relationship happened. So she's an OB-GYN, a mom, a podcaster. Her podcast is the Fit and Fabulous podcast, so check it out. She's a fitness and nutrition expert and overall badass. In addition to being a doctor in OB-GYN, she then went on to do an integrative medicine fellowship because fitness and nutrition are so important. And in her side time, she is the top 15 in Mrs America 2021 and appeared on NBC Titan games with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, like side gig projects. So amazing. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Seriously, an honor.
Very cool. So tell us your story. For people who don't know you, tell us kind of how did you start on this journey to then accomplish these amazing things?
Well, what's interesting is how I ever got into this space was on a very personal level. I mean, you read an amazing bio and lots of accolades, but I'm just as human as all of my patients are. And I think one of the most incredible things to experience as a human is to inspire other humans. And I got to a place in my life where I, from the outside, looked very accomplished, looked very healthy, but I was really stuck mentally, physically, in a lot of different ways. And when you learn that ability to inspire others around you, that's like the true ripple effect of the world. Like that's how you leave your legacy forever. And so the short version of it is basically, I grew up as a little girl in Nebraska. I was a 3-sport athlete, had a very athletic build. And that was great. Went to college, was on a pre-med track, played college softball. But I always was kind of living in the world where women weren't supposed to have muscles. You know, that was very masculine. I was always worried about my size. When I was a freshman in high school, my mom took me to a modeling agency who wanted to sign me, but told me I'd have to be a plus size model. And thankfully, my mom kind of basically told me to tell them to F off. And so I went to college, went on my pre-med track, met my husband in college. We moved to Omaha, Nebraska to start medical school. And now here this sudden shift. My undergrad study was nutrition, exercise science. I'm pursuing a medical degree, but I'm suddenly very sedentary, going from like 3-sport athlete to like sitting in the library, taking tests, studying. And my nutrition wasn't the greatest. I mean, for having a nutrition degree, I was like your normal, you know, high school kid, college kid, got away with eating, you know, whatever I wanted. And then suddenly it caught up with me. And then I had my 3 pregnancies, and I'm an obstetrician. And if you want to find out, you know, what your genetic predispositions are to cardiovascular disease and diabetes, you're going to find out in pregnancy. And so I failed all my glucose testing during my pregnancies. And after my 3rd daughter was born, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I was diagnosed with prediabetes. I had been told prior to getting pregnant with my first daughter that I had PCOS. I was offered metformin and Clomid to try to get pregnant because I wasn't cycling once I came off birth control. And so here I was in 2015, and I had a preventable medical condition. I was tired. I was asleep on the couch at 8 o'clock. I mean, I had a great marriage. I had a great job, but I just didn't feel like I was me. And so I really, I had a personal tragedy happen in my life, which it's unfortunate that these things have to happen, but I lost one of my best friends in the middle of her pregnancy. And it was this sudden realization, you know, we deal with death and dying as physicians all the time, but it was this sudden realization of my own mortality, that I could wake up dead tomorrow or not wake up or whatever it was. And that I basically vowed from that day forward to live every day I woke up breathing was a great day to be alive. And I'm going to live my life with a different purpose and a different passion. But I felt like I had to start with my nutrition. So I set out on this very personal journey to fix my diet. I had a nutrition degree, right? And a medical degree. I should know exactly the perfect formulation, the perfect diet, the perfect exercise program, right? And I realized that, oh my God, like in medicine, first of all, they don't teach us these things. How do I apply this clinically in my practice? So I started experimenting with lots of different ways of eating and started working out again and lifting weights. And what started out as just kind of fixing the lifestyle things manifested into, it changed my career. It changed my relationship with my husband. It changed the way that I parent my children. And once I felt so good, I started going after things I never thought I would go after. You know, that's where like the Mrs. America thing and Titan games, it was like, I'm going to just start breaking all these molds. Like I felt like my whole life I was shoved into this little box of like, well, if you're a doctor, you can't do these other things. Or, you know, women are supposed to be feminine and be quiet. And so I just decided I have 3 little girls and I'm going to show the world what you can do. You can do anything you want to do if you're willing to work for it. And that's how Dr. Fit and Fabulous was born.
Ah, amazing. What an amazing story. We have very similar paths because I'm like, I am doing this now, like this podcast stuff and all stuff to show my daughters what's possible. Like I want them to see if you have an idea and you work hard, you can actually create something in this world. And it's so cool. And it sounds like you have the mindset where you are of like, what can I do next? What's next?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, even in medicine, right? You can have a job where you just check in and check out. But I love being a doctor and I love delivering babies. But I think that I feel a higher calling of really making an impact on women's lives. And that's why I spend so much time out of my own clinical practice doing these things.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Were you inspired by somebody, or how did you like catch that of like, oh, inspiring others is the key to this world?
Well, I think that was just an evolution of my mindset. You know, when I first started, like I said, it was just literally on a personal level. Okay, I can't ask my patients to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. It does not lie well with me to lay in bed at night telling patients to eat right and move right and sleep right and do all these things if I can't do it myself. If I can't do it as a busy mom of 3, how can I ever expect it, right? Because excuses are subtle, seductive, and believable. They're subtle, seductive, and believable. Trust me, I have all of them. I mean, I could tell my doctor, I know I've got prediabetes, I've got hypothyroidism, I'm a doctor, I'm a mom, this and that. My husband's a police officer, he works nights. You can come up with anything you want. But what you really have to do is change your internal dialogue. Our internal dialogue, we are wired as a mammalian species to protect us. Our brain is constantly sensing things in our environment that cause pain. And unfortunately, lifestyle interventions cause pain for a lot of people. And so we shy away from those things. We come up with all the different excuses. And so what I did was I changed it was just an evolution of my own thinking. Okay, I'm going to prove that I can eat right. Okay, I'm going to prove that I can get up at 4:30 every single morning and work out before I have to be in the operating room at 7. And once I started doing those things, then like the thinking became even easier, because confidence isn't something where you just wake up and you're confident. I mean, I would describe myself as a confident person. I mean, even as a little girl, but confidence is created through action. Confidence is when you get up and you do the things repeatedly over and over and over, and you build confidence, and isn't just like an inherent trait. And so you can't expect to get somewhere in your life with the same level of thinking that got you to where you are now. So if you want the $1 million answer to fixing whatever problem it is, I'll tell you right now, it's working on your mindset, hiring a mindset coach, finding somebody. I mean, because there's a lot of different ways to eat and move and sleep, and you'll hear lots of different advice and you'll get confused about which one's right or wrong. The only one that will work is the one you'll actually do, what you actually believe in your belief system. And the other part of it too is performing a life audit. And what I mean by that is we literally become the people that we surround ourselves with. So it's not anything against the people that have been part of my life for the last number of years, but if you look at the people that are in my life day in and day out right now, it's very different than it was 5 or 6 years ago. And it doesn't mean that those people don't mean the world to me, but you have to surround yourself with people that continue to push your limits and to push yourself to be a better human. And so Sometimes, unfortunately, those are people that are really close to you. But when people start to change, those subtle, seductive, believable excuses will just start hemorrhaging from all around you.
Yeah, totally. And I think, you know, given social media and the internet, those people, your only choice was in your hometown before, right? But it's like you can actually find a network of people who can like push you and challenge you. And they could live in Maine, you know, they could live in West Virginia, wherever they live now, because we have the power of the internet that we're not kind of limited to the people that are just in our geographic region. It's kind of a nice
Totally.
one good thing of all of this social media stuff. Um,
Yes.
yeah, do you think that, did you fix, because people, I know people are going to be thinking like, well, what should I do first? Should I do the nutrition first? Should I do the fitness first? Should I do the mindset first? What did you do? And do you think there's a right answer to that question?
Well, I think the mindset is first, really kind of diving into who are you? And who I was is deep down inside, I was this physically strong, beautiful, smart, courageous mom and doctor. Like I knew who I was, but I didn't wake up and look in the mirror and feel that way. And so you really have to ask yourself, like, who are you? Who am I? Answer that question. And you really sometimes have to make a declaration without any evidence. And that's okay. We all start at some place, right? But I think that I talk about these 5 pillars of health, like when we're just talking about health: nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, and then environment. And I think if you really had to put all your eggs in one basket, nutrition is the one thing that can probably change your health in the most rapid amount of time. Like when we look at studies on prediabetes and insulin resistance, we can see within 7 to 14 days an incredible improvement in biomarkers. I mean, we're talking a very short amount of time. If you're going to continue to eat a bad diet and think you're going to out exercise that or out sleep it or meditate it away, probably not going to happen. And you do have to eventually work on all 5 areas. But I think that if you really had to pick one to focus on, nutrition is the one thing that can really profoundly impact your life. Because what I've found is, like, I didn't realize I had a little bit of anxiety and depression, but I can tell when my diet's in a good place, like I don't have any of those symptoms, or just like real subtle things like acne. When my diet starts to slide, I get breakouts again. I get more anxious. And so I just think it's the one thing that we do multiple times per day, every single day. And so it really adds up. It really adds up quickly.
Yeah, totally. And I think so many people like bad food. A lot of people say don't label food bad, but it's like some easy food it's like fast and quick, and it takes intention to make like healthy choices. Is my internet okay for you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just coming in and out
Delayed.
just a tiny bit.
Okay. Yeah, so I think a lot of people are like, they don't put time and energy into like creating the food that's good for them because they think it takes so much. But I think it's like exercise of like incorporating it into your day. Was it easy for you to like radically change your diet, or how did you do that?
So I had prediabetes. So I thought, well, I'm just going to eat whole foods. So we kind of started with just eliminating the processed things. And I think that's the easiest thing because they're full of basically no nutrients. It's all energy. It's all energy calories. So these are things that have added sugars, flours, vegetable oils. Like eliminate those. And I think we'll all agree you're eating a good diet, whether you're carnivore, vegan, Mediterranean, anywhere in between. And then what I did was I started to completely cut out other grains. So I kind of went more paleo. So it was just like, I would have some apples maybe here or there, but I realized when I tried to go paleo that I love dairy and I love cheese. So then I kind of found myself with more of a ketogenic lifestyle. And that's when I really just things started to click. Like my brain was working better, sleeping better. From a body composition standpoint, I was really happy where things were. And then in 2019 is when I really started to get back into the gym. And I realized that even though I was eating low carb or ketogenic, I really wasn't prioritizing protein in my diet. And when I dove into the research on protein, women are, we're not good protein eaters. Like men are like, oh, eat meat, eat steak, but women just, we don't seem to be that, way as carnivorous, just like at baseline as men are. So I really started to prioritize protein in my diet. And I thought I have to get back to weightlifting. Now I had really just had this kind of bad stigma in my mind from my childhood that weightlifting would make you masculine. I kind of vowed to never lift a weight ever again after I left college, because like I literally couldn't find genes that would, I have genetically large quadricep muscles. Not sexy, right? Women are supposed to have like thin legs. But I started to get back into gym lifting weights. And when we look at metabolic health, if you want to prevent yourself from getting diabetes, one of the best things you can do is have a lot of muscle. I was just listening to Peter Attia was recently on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about how diabetes and smoking increase your risk of cardiovascular disease like twofold, but exercise decreases your risk like fivefold. And he was talking about the VO2 max. And I commented and I said, find me a diabetic that smokes that has an amazing VO2 max. Not going to happen. When you look at people that have a lot of muscle, especially women, it will prevent you from getting diseases of aging, things like diabetes, high blood pressure, some cancers. So we all have a genetic predisposition to certain things, but muscle really is an organ of longevity. And when I started doing resistance training and prioritizing protein in the diet, that's when things just really started clicking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. And I think, especially as physicians, we don't get taught, nobody's like the expert in muscle. Like there's no like subspecialty for muscle. It's literally a neglected organ. We don't think of it as like metabolically active, that it actually works to prevent insulin resistance, that actually works to like, the more you lift, the stronger your bones are. So it helps with osteoporosis. Nobody gets any education on how important muscle is for us, let alone like preventing falls as we get older.
Well, and we're so obsessed with obesity, and it's, the BMI for people who have muscle is a poor indicator, and the people that are actually obese, that actually, gives them more credit where credit's not due. And so unfortunately, I wish I could say to a patient in front of me, you need XYZ muscle percentage, right? We talk about body fat percentage all the time, but there's some people that can carry extra body fat and be completely metabolically healthy as long as they have a lot of muscle. And if you were to develop a age-related disease, we know that what starts to happen is you just start wasting your muscle, you become sarcopenic, and that's the downward spiral. And so I say this on my social media, I just want to be hard to kill. I know that I'm going to die one day. I know I'm going to die one day. I don't know what it'll be. I don't think about my death often, but I'm just grateful for the days that I do have. And like I said, I just want to be hard to kill.
I love that, because I think, building the muscle, that building that fitness and resilience, it helps you weather the illness. It helps you weather recovery, whatever might come along. Right. So it's another reason.
Well, that's like COVID has really highlighted that. And I think that unfortunately that hasn't been the conversation, is that, vaccines are effective as a prevention strategy for like the masses, but unfortunately they work least effective in people who are metabolically unhealthy. So no matter what we do, whether anybody listening believes in lockdown or masks or vaccines, that's not the conversation I'd like to have. It means that we need to have a serious conversation about our metabolic health, because those are the people that are clearly at risk despite any other measure.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're from the moment it started, I'm like, we are missing on like a national conversation level, a discussion of just being healthy and well. Kind of like in the like World War II victory garden, right? Everybody plant the garden, everybody get the vegetables, of like, everybody just get as healthy as you can be, whatever that means for you, whatever part of that you want to take. But it's like what we can do as a nation to fight this virus before we even had vaccines come along, and even now.
Yeah.
But I'm like, what a missed national conversation.
Well, it's unfortunately, there's a lot of politics in food in general. And, I always say like, gosh, how did I ever get to the point where I had a nutrition degree and a medical degree, and I'm sitting here living with prediabetes? And it's amazing to me in medicine how politics are really wrapped up in food and pharma and the funding of research. And I mean, it just is. I wish I wish that I could say that, science isn't tainted by that, but unfortunately it just is. It's the world we live in.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where all the more like the personal responsibility of like finding your why to make that commitment to yourself. And that really struck a chord when you were talking about, confidence in yourself is like when you make that commitment to yourself to eat right, to show up and exercise, to do the mind work, you're committing to yourself again and again. And it actually like changes who you are, that you now, you keep your promises that you make to yourself. It's so powerful.
Well, and I think we can learn so much from, like, I have little children. And so I think we can learn so much from kids, because as an adult, we forget that we have to parent ourselves sometimes. Remember, like that first year when you went off to college, you're like, I'm going to stay up late and I'm going to eat Taco Bell, and right? Because it's like a life without rules. And I think we forget sometimes as adults that we have to parent ourselves. But when you look at little kids and when they learn new things, like a little baby that's starting to walk and falls down, and then they get back up again. Why? Because everybody's cheering them on and everybody's like, come on, you can do it. But, what do you do when no one's cheering for you?
Right.
That's what defines the people that live in the margin. That's what defines like the 1% of the world, is people that have figured that out.
Yeah, totally. And like, I think there's a part of a delayed gratification to this too, right? Is like what you eat today helps create how healthy you're going to be in the future, right? But you might not feel that today. You're not experiencing the diabetes of the future. So there's some like delayed gratification in doing the work for your future self.
Yeah. When patients come in and want help with their diet, I say, okay, I'll work with you, but I want you to understand that slowly is the fastest way for you to get there.
Yes.
Because
totally.
the social media and the internet is about like 8-week booty building program, 9-week detox program. Unfortunately, these are not the things that are going to make your life better. It's just these small daily habits that add up over time.
Totally. When I started my fitness journey about 3 years ago now, like I always kind of dabbled. My husband's like, you always were kind of fit, but like for me, committing to 5 to 6 times a week of fitness, like it made me realize 3 or 4 months in, like my butt was not, I did not notice anything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been lied to this whole time. There's no 6-week triceps. Like it's all just marketing. And I'm like, but you need to know that, because otherwise 4 months in, you're going to give up. It wasn't until like a year of doing it, you actually, for me, started noticing things. It's like, this is a long, slow game, not like this, 6 weeks to better abs that like everybody thinks is reality.
Well, and I always say, like, think about why you're working out. Like I like competing, but something like CrossFit, like that's just not, like, if the injury rate's high. I mean, I work out because I want to be able to sprint up a flight of stairs and pull out a baby with forceps, or I want to be able to, I mean, just think about like why you physically work out. Like, is it aesthetic? Is it because you want to be strong? Is it because that's what will keep you going?
Totally. And I think, in our profession, that doing surgery is actually a very physical profession. I don't think surgeons think of themselves as like a physically active job, but like how many people have to stop doing our job because they're not fit enough, they get worn out. Right. And so it's like that whole like cross training to do surgery was like a aha for me.
Yeah, it's super physical.
Yeah, maybe I'll have less back pain if I work out. Right. So talk to me, is our connections good? Is our internet good? Okay, cool. So why do you think so many women don't believe in themselves?
Say that one more time.
Why do you think so many women don't believe in themselves?
Well, I think that I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think that society, for women in general, we have this path. We're supposed to, get married. We're supposed to, even just women in the workforce is kind of a new thing. Like, women aren't supposed to be surgeons. I think there's these, social societal norms that keep women from pursuing certain things. But I think that we're just different than men. We're really more into nurture. We don't want to be perceived as, a leader, an alpha, when we look at like us as a mammalian species. And I think that that perpetually keeps women from breaking into spaces where they would be perceived as strong and smart and all these other things. I really just think it's a societal thing. That women can't be scientists and surgeons and these types of different fields. I just think that it's just the world that we live in, and it's not for men. I think there's easier paths, to the top, to leadership roles and things like that. And I am not. You will never find me using that as an excuse. Because it is available. In 2021, anything you want is available to you. And that's what women need to start doing.
Yeah, I love it. I love that message. So tell me about, this podcast is about sexuality and, being at ease with our body and sex and our relationships. How would you say kind of your transformation, did that spill over into either your relationship with your husband or your intimate lives? Would you say that kind of got better too, or did you notice any of that change?
So when I started medical school, my husband wanted to have our first daughter. He didn't want to be an old dad. That's what he said. So we had our first daughter, and it's pretty incredible what happens to your body when you go through a pregnancy. And nobody ever prepared me for that. I got stretch marks on my abdomen. I was busy in medical school, so I wasn't eating right. And my body just, it felt like it changed, and it was never going to go back to the way it was before. And that was kind of a realization for me. And then my daughters are all 23 months apart. So I was like, had a baby, waited a year, got pregnant again, had a baby, waited a year, got pregnant again. And I had really, really pretty significant postpartum blues with my first two babies. And I knew that just from being a collegiate athlete, I loved working out, but I just didn't have the time. And so what I thought is I'll sign up for a half marathon. I'll just start running again. And I started running after my second daughter was born. I did 2 half marathons, but my body still never went back to the way it was supposed to be. I just had this like skin that was hanging from my stomach and like tuck it into my pants. And when you start to not feel confident in the way your body looks naked, it really does start to affect your sexual relationships. And God bless my husband's heart. I mean, the man literally every single day we've been together. I think I was just telling somebody, we've been together like 19 years. He would tell me how sexy and beautiful I am every single day of our relationship. Like if there was any point in our relationship where he wasn't physically attracted, he's never admitted it on this God green earth. But it does start to change how you feel as the woman, and I think that social media and the world kind of plays into that sexy looks a certain way. And here you are trying to keep these 3 small humans alive, and you're tired. And that starts to affect your, desire to participate in sexual activity, or, you've had a baby and you've had like a laceration and, you have pain with intercourse. Like there's just such a multitude of reasons why I think postpartum women start to experience this level of sexual dysfunction. And so after my third daughter was born and I started like running, I lost the weight, but like my body still didn't it still didn't like look right. So I actually pursued a breast lift and a mini tummy tuck. I've actually never talked about this on any of my social media before, but I thought that would fix it. And I don't regret it one bit. I'm still super, super happy about that. But it still didn't change the confidence that I had in my body. And so I'll tell you what really changed it for me was the mindset of like knowing who I am and what I want. There is nothing sexier about a woman who doesn't care what anybody else thinks. And it was finally like when I broke down the barriers of like embracing my muscles and like being physically strong and just like building that daily confidence in my actions, and like that manifests, you know, in your sexual relationships. Like when you feel really confident about who you are and like what you bring to the relationship, it made like a huge impact. And I'll be real, when your kids get older, it is a little easier, you know, when you can like send them outside to play, or you can finally start to vacation and like create, you know, that time in your relationship. But there is definitely a period of time that women go through postpartum, and the physical changes in your body will really start to play mind games with who you are as a sexual being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing for women to hear is I'd say it's the norm. I just read a research paper. It's like 70% of women postpartum have sexuality changes. So it's almost a normal, common. It tends to not go on forever, right? So just into saying like, hey, this is temporary. You will get sleep again. You will, you know, reclaim your body again. But it's so common, and women just think they're the only one, right? Like they're the broken one, and everybody else is fine. Dude, I just lost you, and then it came back on.
It booted you off your own podcast.
I please God have that be recorded from the last 30 minutes, but we'll see. It's recording again right now.
It did. It said, it's on my end, it said stop recording. And then when you pop back on, it said recording again.
I blame the Pacific Northwest rain. There's too many clouds.
Okay, so you were talking about the percentage of women who have sexual dysfunction postpartum.
Yeah. So we're just, and I think so many women think they're the only one, and to hear your story and to hear how incredibly common it is can just help women be like, okay, this is like a legit experience that's happening, and I know it's not going to last forever, which I just think is so powerful to hear.
Well, I just think pregnancy in general is just portrayed in such a like rainbows and butterflies. People are throwing you baby showers, right? Everybody will hold a door for a pregnant woman. And you have this like newborn baby that's crying and screaming, and like women are so marginalized in that moment. Everybody comes for the first week, they want to see the baby. Nobody talks about what the first 3 months are postpartum, where you're still bleeding from your vagina, your bottom hurts, you're constipated, you have milk leaking from your breasts. Like it's not sexy in any way, shape, or form. And you have these hormonal changes that are happening, and it's a crazy ride. And I tell women, I'm like, listen, this is going to get better. Every week goes by, it's going to get better. But the other thing that women have to understand is if you're breastfeeding from a sexual function, because I know your followers are big in that. Women who are breastfeeding, you suppress estrogen. And women who are breastfeeding can get, I didn't really experience this, but you can get severe vaginal dryness just from breastfeeding. And sometimes postpartum women need vaginal estrogen therapy. So just know that pain is not normal with intercourse after having a baby. Dryness is not normal. So if you're experiencing these things, talk to your doctor.
Totally. And vaginal estrogen is safe for the breastfeeding individual. It's not going to harm the baby or the breast milk. That's really important to know too. And I think, you know, just to add on that is like, it's okay if you're touched out and you do not want vaginal penetration. You know, that might require a conversation with your partner to be like, I love you no less. I just can't do this right now. But how else can we keep our bond, be intimate? Because I think a lot of people don't talk about the problems, and then it kind of compounds, right? Like the guy's like, I'm being rejected, or she doesn't want me, and the woman's like, I just need a break. I just need some sleep. And really talking about it so people just know, okay, the bond is still there. It just looks a little different right now.
Yeah, communication is so important. And I've had such an amazing supportive partner. Like when our girls were little, I did the feeding, he did the diaper changes, but communication just across the board as part of your relationship, and especially part of your sexual relationship.
Yeah, super important. Okay, so tell me about, one thing I see you post a lot about social media is PCOS. Can you explain that to people who might not know what that is? And then how do you get diagnosed with it, and how do you go about treating that?
Yeah, so PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, a really horrible name for a spectrum of a disease. There's really three criteria that are involved with diagnosis. So the first one is either what we call oligomenorrhea or amenorrhea. It essentially means that you're not ovulating on a regular basis. So you're missing periods or you don't have periods at all. The second criteria is what we call hyperandrogenism. So this is either clinical signs of hyperandrogenism, which is like dark hair growth, acne, specifically dark hair growth, like in the face, on the abdomen, and the inner thighs. And there's different kind of levels of that. Some of that is totally normal, and it might be. So there's ways that we assess that clinically, or it could be biochemical hyperandrogenism. So sometimes patients may look very normal on the outside, but they have extremely high levels of testosterone or DHEA, which are two androgens within the bloodstream. And then the third one is on ultrasound, polycystic ovaries. Now, one thing I want women to understand is that the ovary's job every single month to make a cyst. So the presence of a cyst or multiple cysts on the ovaries does not mean you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, because I see this all the time, that a patient has been in the emergency room and they got some kind of scan and they had a couple cysts on their ovaries and now they think they have PCOS. So that's not, it's a very distinct pattern of cysts. We see these tiny little, multiple little primordial follicles all over the ovary. And it's not just a cyst or a couple cysts. There has to be a certain number of them, a certain size of them to classify. So that's the Rotterdam criteria. So you essentially need 2 out of the 3. The real question is, what causes PCOS? Well, there's certainly some genetic predisposition. So if you have a mom or a sister that had it, you're more likely to have it. We don't really know. And that's kind of, I think the thing that's really clouded the water in 2021 is that PCOS, because they have these high levels of androgens, they tend to have an increased risk of metabolic disease long-term. So insulin insensitive, thyroid problems, depression, but we also see a lot of metabolic disease in 2021. So I think teasing out those things is important for your clinician to figure out. But what we really see is insulin resistance, especially at the level of the ovary. And so that drives up the androgens, and then you don't ovulate, and then that creates a lot of estrogen and lack of progesterone. And so it creates this kind of hormonal cascade that causes all of the clinical manifestations of PCOS. And these patients have high rates of infertility. They're harder to treat from a fertility perspective. And so when we look at what can a woman do for PCOS, a lot of these women are placed on oral contraceptive pills. And although this can help with the anovulation, it can actually help with some of the acne and hyperandrogenism, because it increases something called sex hormone binding globulin that binds up a lot of their free androgens. It's not a good long-term solution. I was told at one point I had PCOS. It's hard for me to know. I definitely have some of the, I'm very prone to acne. I definitely wasn't ovulating, but I believe, I personally, when you look at the studies, there's only like a handful of studies that look at dietary therapy. But I truly believe that most of these women really, really benefit from low carb diets. And anecdotally, I take care of a lot of women. We put them on ketogenic therapy for short periods of time. They're able to ovulate and cycle again. I've gotten a lot of them pregnant. Just long term, we know that these are people that probably would benefit from a low carb diet long term. The studies across the board, when they've placed patients on these types of dietary interventions, either Mediterranean or low carb, a reduction in triglycerides, their HDL comes up, their LDL goes down, their fasting insulin and fasting glucose numbers all improve. And so from a long-term metabolic health perspective, these people really benefit from dietary interventions. They do tend to gain muscle easy. So going to the gym and lifting some weights, they tend to be athletes. We see a lot of athletes that have PCOS, but they do have higher rates of infertility, which is important, to really explore some of these lifestyle interventions, because we have treatments for the hyperandrogenism. We can definitely, cover up the period issue, but long-term, when we're talking about fertility, lifestyle interventions are super important.
Awesome. Is there a diet? I see a lot of women. How has diet influenced thyroid? Is there any research on that? Like people on a certain diet have more thyroid disease, or I just see some people post on that, and I know nothing about diet and thyroid.
Well, here's the issue with, so think of our thyroid like our engine in our car, right? And anytime a woman diets by creating any sort of calorie restriction, we see a reduction in thyroid function. So these women that come from a place of like chronic dieting and things like that, calorie restriction in general will harm your thyroid. And I don't want to say harm, I guess, but it will reduce thyroid, the amount of thyroid that you make. It's like the thermostat going up and down because that's protective, right? If your body is saying there's not a lot of food in the environment, it's going to try to conserve, because as a woman's body, especially, our body through these nutrient sensing pathways is constantly trying to decide if this is a good time to reproduce. So if there's not a lot of nutrition available, not a lot of calories available, which in 2021 is a complete and utter lie, we've got we've got energy calories galore, but it will reduce thyroid function. Now, hypothyroidism is much more common amongst women, less common amongst men. Worldwide, iodine deficiency tends to be the most common reason for hypothyroidism. And we do see that in the US because our soils are very depleted. We don't get as much iodine in the diet, but there's a lot of other cofactors needed for thyroid function, things like selenium, some of our B vitamins, and people's diets are just across the board very nutrient deplete. And so diet can have a huge impact on thyroid. I think my hypothyroidism was likely due to my insulin resistance, and insulin resistance can be a cause of hypothyroidism. The other cause of hypothyroidism among women is autoimmune. So Hashimoto's disease, where women make an antibody against the thyroid that eventually attacks it so that it stops producing as much thyroid hormone, is the other reason why more women experience.
I live in a barn.
I don't know what the last thing you heard was.
No, I was like literally going perfectly. The autoimmune low thyroid.
Autoimmune.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. That makes sense. Well, tell us before my internet dies forever. What's next on the menu for you in your exciting life? What are you looking forward to in 2022? And then tell us where we can find you.
Well, I'm finally taking just a little bit of a break and focusing on the Fit and Fabulous podcast, and it's going phenomenally. I'm working on a book in the future, but I have 3 little kids and I'm just enjoying this stage in life. They keep me really busy, but people can find me on social media. I'm most active on Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got the Fit and Fabulous podcast. I do intermittently do some coaching groups, and we should have another one coming first of year. So you can certainly look for that in 2022.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.